The June budget was a surplus. It was reported back.
Yes.
And there were some early reports of tariff revenue starting to come in and creating this surplus for the first time.
I like this image first. Welcome to the golden age. Thanks to the leadership of POTUS, the U.S. has generated over $150 billion in tariff revenue in the past 6 months. Look at that fist. Strong.
Anybody?
What? Oh, high fives? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we did
golden
it.
age, baby.
And I've paid some of them.
that's half of that's mogul shirts. All right, so this is the bipartisan deficit tracker. Now I'm gonna see that purple line right there, the pinkish purple one right in the middle of 2025. That is our current deficit for this year. That's how much we've spent by each month. Okay. Around this time last year, we had spent $1.2 trillion more than we made in 2024. That's what we were in June. Now we're at 1.3. I just want to be super clear. So when this line goes up, that's a bad month. That's a month where we spent more than we took. When it goes down, which it happens sometimes in all these different years, that's a surplus month. What they've been doing, Scott Bessent, Trump, all these right-wing talking heads have been going around and saying, this is our first June budget surplus in 20 years. It's just June. There's been surpluses in April, in July, in February, in every now and then you'll have a surplus month. It's pretty standard, but the overall year is bad. But because there was a payment that fell on a weekend in May that ended up going to June, paid in May instead of June. The government made its payments a little early. And so it landed on a weird month. And so now we have a surplus in June for some reason. And they're saying like, wow, things are drastically different. I promise you, first of all, we have spent more this year than the bad year of 2024. And by the end of the year, this number will still be much higher. It'll be worse than every other year, maybe than 2020 and 2021. They're like soft saying June, and they're making it seem like we got our first surplus in 20 years, like we've turned something around. There's nothing different. We are still spending way more than we make. And by the end of the year, we will have spent like $1.5 to $2 trillion more than we brought in.
And this is all because of revenue that was meant to be paid out in May that fell into June.
It was paid early. It paid at the end of May instead of the beginning of June.
Okay.
So we got the payment out of the way, which is why you can see like between the April and May on this graph, on the purple one, huge spike.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bad month. We added a lot to the deficit. Now we had a slightly easier June, so we cleared. The tariff revenue helped a little bit, but it's very small in comparison.
Okay, so why, if I was diehard for Bessent and the boys, why couldn't this be indicative of it continuing to go down after this? Could this not be the start of a trend?
I mean, maybe. You know what? By the end of the year, if this purple line is plunged and we're just swimming in tariff revenue, that's fine. You can even scroll down. I think they actually address this directly. And in fact, they say, the federal government ran a monthly surplus of $26 billion in June. However, this is because a government payments typically due June 1st shifted to May this year. Accounting for this timing shift, we actually ran a monthly deficit of $71 billion. And then it says we're going to have probably a worse one in July. Looking ahead, barring any major changes in economic conditions, the government will likely run a larger deficit in July. The idea that this is some large trend is, I think, untrue. And I think it's just this weird little statistical blip that is being turned into a story that we've turned something around. The fact is, under Biden and under Trump, we spend way, way more than we make. And in fact, the big beautiful bill has only made it worse. Outside of the red and the black line there, which is our worst years ever, 21 and 20, this is the worst year. I mean, this year's terrible. We're at some of the worst America's ever been in terms of spending more than we make. And to pretend like we're not is a joke. I'm glad you brought up this question. It actually makes me really disappointed in Scott Bessent because I'm a Scott Bessent, I wouldn't say fan, but I respect him and I read him before he even got this job. He knows what he's doing. When he goes up there and says the June, he slips it in. He knows what he's doing. And this is not a surplus.
Two questions / follow-ups.
Okay.
One, it looks like that because of the drop to June, that we're actually comparable to the previous 2 years. Like if you look at where the dot is on June.
That's right.
What I heard you saying is like it's worse than previous years. To me, it seems like if you look at where the dot is on June, we are comparable to 2023 and 2024 now.
But from what they're saying in the report, the expectation is that
it'll bounce
given the
back
following
up.
month, it's going to bounce back aggressively above the other.
But the way I would read this so far, I mean, it jumped up aggressively last year in July. I mean, for people who are listening online, basically we're looking at how much money we've spent this year, how much deficit we're in this year versus previous years.
Yeah.
As far as I can tell, this is like exactly this, at least very similar.
It's very similar in line with 23 and 24. That's correct.
Yeah.
But, as I said, but also as Trump said, or Scott Bessent said, these Biden deficits are unsustainable. They're horrendous.
Right. They are as bad as the
and
previous
they're as bad. They've improved nothing.
Yeah, I guess it is kind of a weird thing where Biden's last 2 years were some of the more ridiculous spending that has ever happened.
Yeah.
So the idea that if we're meeting that as the bar, that
it doesn't
mean it's not even remotely good.
Yeah, those were terrible, and they were rallied against rightly by Scott Bessent. And they would have $1 trillion deficits every 100 days, and it's like we're in the same zone. And by the end of the year, my expectation is that the 25 number is going to be higher than 23 and 24, just based on the big beautiful bill and the tax cuts. So we'll see. I don't know, but I just it's certainly not better. And they're implying that it is.
Yeah. I have another question. So this tweet by the White House, this was, I think, last week. They tweet so much. I tried to find this tweet again today. And there was like 300 tweets I had to go through. My God. They basically said this year, we've gotten $150 billion of tariff revenue. So this is the first half of the year. We're halfway through, right? A little more, $150 billion. In theory, that means we will be making $300 billion by the end of the year in tariff revenue that wasn't there before, asterisk. As a reminder, the way I like to think about this just simplifies things. Every year, the U.S. government spends $2 trillion more than we make. If we can get that down to zero, then at least we aren't losing more money every year. That is the goal, right? So 150 billion already, and then 300, let's say if you double it by the end of the year, that's a decent chunk, right? That's not bad in terms of working down the deficit. And what I was thinking about is, while they certainly haven't explained it like this, as we've talked about, tariffs are basically a tax on American consumers. This isn't money that is appearing out of thin air. This 150 billion is Americans have paid this. And what I was wondering is was it their intention that with the big beautiful bill, they cut taxes a lot, which loses revenue for the United States, but they're basically just introducing a different type of tax with tariffs. And so even though they're portraying it as look, you have all freedom from money and we're shutting down unfair trade deals, really what they're doing is saying, we'll lower your income tax, we'll increase your tariff tax. Does that feel like it makes sense? Do you think that's what Bessent is maybe doing here?
That was part of the rationalization when we discussed the big beautiful bill. They were insisting that even though this is creating such a massive deficit on paper, the revenue is to be made up by the tariff changes that were made. But it doesn't.
They keep framing it as tariffs are great for the Americans and low taxes are great for the Americans. And I think probably internally they were like, look, tariffs are not going to be good for the average American. The tax would be good. Maybe these offset. And so I'm wondering if there's a little more thought to it than maybe we thought.
Yeah, maybe. But the problem is that the tariff is a tax on people that buy and consume regular cheap goods. The average person is paying these taxes, and the tax cuts are primarily on wealthier people. So we've replaced, taxes on corporations and the rich with a tax on you buying toys from China and buying steel from other countries and buying, it's just worse. But whatever. I mean, let's listen. All this would be fine, if our number's $2 trillion and we're raising some tariff revenue. My expectation is that this is going to cause problems in the job markets. We're going to raise less money. We're going to have fewer people employed and GDP growth and jobs numbers.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that. So
problems in the job market.
The job market. Yes.
Problems in the job market. Something interesting happened recently. On August 1st, a report was released by the Department of Labor under the Commissioner Erica McIntyre. And this jobs report noted that through July, there was only an additional 73,000 jobs created. And it also notably reduced the number of jobs that they had initially reported from the previous 2 months. They had previously said that in May, there was 144,000 jobs that had been created, and in June, 147,000 jobs created, and those were reduced to 19,000 and 14,000 respectively,
Perry,
which is a massive drop.
Is the idea that the government estimates the amount of jobs that are created, and they're like, this is what we think is happening, and then a month later, they look at what actually happened, and what does the revision mean? What's the process here for how it changes that much?
I mean, the short version is that as more time passes, more data becomes available to accurately estimate these things.
So they retroactively go back and say, we were wrong, here's the real number.
And these corrections are pretty normal. This happens frequently. This going back into the past to correct data based on new information that we get happens all the time.
Okay.
What was particularly shocking about this was the scale of the revision. So the amount that this got reduced by. Mm-hmm. And I think just looking at the numbers, this feels pretty scary, right?
Hey, can you pull up slide 4 actually? Because it describes visually what you were just saying. So slide 4, I drew what the numbers were when they first announced. So you can see there was 144,000 new jobs, revised down to 19, 147 down to 14. And when these numbers were announced, these were celebrated. These were good numbers. Jobs are in the right direction. We have hundreds of thousands of new jobs pouring into America. Now the revision is such that 250,000 less jobs than they thought. These were pretty terrible months. In fact, you can see the worst months in recent history.
theory as to why there's been such a sharp fall off from my understanding.
Because she's a liberal cuck.
Yes.
Well, that's coming in at number 1. Okay. That was the Watch Mojo number 1.
Yeah.
Another thing that I had seen was the staff that is available to capture and calculate the data across the board at departments like this or in other parts of the government that produce relevant data to calculate these numbers are increasingly short-staffed. There's been a lot of staff cuts over the years because of the Doge cuts that had happened earlier on. So there's fewer federal employees like managing and interacting with data that informs this type of reporting. And then also there is a huge difference in the expected amount of seasonal labor that was supposed to come in. So during the summer months, there's a huge amount of expected summer work or seasonal work. And this excludes farm work, it mentioned. But that boost in seasonal employment is not happening at all. And it's way, way lower than expected. The only place that's seeing big leaps in hiring is in healthcare sectors. Healthcare sectors are really desperate and stretched for people right now. I think specifically elderly care or taking care of the old people that are starting to die.
And the jobs are only to get rid of, to take care of the boomers with money. The jobs revised down is like construction is down, manufacturing's down, retail's down. Like every job that would be considered to do well in a good economy is all being revised down. And the only thing up is healthcare and then some government like teacher jobs. Like those are the only things that are growing. All private sectors are down. Like private sector employment is down. It's a bad report.
This is the crazy thing. In the wake of this report and the adjustments of these numbers, Ms. McIntyre, or I apologize,
Miss Woke. You just call her what her name is.
It's a tough name to say. Miss Woke apparently was fudging the numbers, and Trump has just fired her. This is, to me, insane. I feel like this is the type of thing that, I know this sits within a sea of actions, and I know this isn't the first red flag or something along the way. I just think it is so insane to read a headline like this about the American president. It speaks so much to the situation that I think we have arrived in, where the president of the country gets a labor report that he doesn't like that indicates that he's doing a bad job, and then he just fires her and then says she made up all the numbers, while he also pressures the chairman of the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates to stimulate the economy. So it's like, to me, it's like, which one is it? Do we have a record-breaking economy that is doing things it's never done before, like you say all the time? Well, then why do we need to lower the interest rates? Why are you doing everything you can to oust Jerome Powell from power?
No, I think you made a really good point there. I just want to explain if you're more casual on interest rates and your eyes glaze over or whatever. Trump has been really hammering Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. And when you do that, if you raise them, that means inflation is the biggest problem. And if you lower them, that means employment's the biggest problem. The only reason you'd lower them is if you thought, oh man, the economy, the jobs market's getting really bad. So this report is a blessing to everything Trump has been saying. Like he could have pointed this and said, look, we need to lower interest rates. Jobs are terrible. But instead, he is calling it fake news. In fact, jobs are great. We have tons of jobs, but also we need to desperately lower interest rates. It just doesn't have any logical through line.
I want to present a counterpoint with the normal caveat of like, look, I don't deeply know or believe this stuff. But Ray Dalio, who is the CEO, well, anyway, head of Bridgewater Capital. So he's considered one of the most legendary investors of all time. So he mentioned something, and he comes out. This is a trusted, like, bipartisan guy who says, I probably would have fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics too. That's because its process for making estimates is obviously obsolete and error-prone, and there's no good plan in the works for fixing it. Goes on to talk more, and then at the end he says, like, look, if the motivation from Trump firing this person is political, like he just doesn't like what they're producing, then that is obviously not okay. So he acknowledges that. And let's be honest, probably that was most of Trump's, motivation, right? But looking at that graph earlier, the estimates originally were, let's say 150,000 jobs created. And then retroactively, they go, we were wrong. It was 15,000. To me, as an uninformed person, seems like they did a shitty job. If you are that far off, if you as the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics are like 10 times off in your estimates, and the country is going off of that, and then a month later, you're like, hey, sorry, I messed up. That's not messing up a little bit. That's like deeply and fundamentally being wrong to a degree that's like, you don't seem competent. I say that as an outside party who doesn't know the actual process, but that's what Ray Dalio is expressing here as well, of like, look, the private markets understand the actual numbers to a more accurate degree. Why is the Bureau of Labor Statistics not doing that either? Regardless of what Trump is doing and why, this doesn't seem like it's being done competently. I'm curious what you guys think.
So first, full disclosure, this is an argument that I need to spend more time digging into because I don't understand statistics well enough to give it. But reading through other people's responses to this argument, because I do think that this argument is really, a lot of people do feel this way. It's like, if the revisions are this wild, if the process is this bad, then how could they be doing a good job to begin with? Has this approach completely fallen out of favor? From attempting to read people who have a stronger grasp of statistics than me, they're saying that those people have a flawed understanding of how these reports are put together.
Okay.
And I think there's something underlying here that I'm unable to explain to you about the process by which these reports are put together that is missing or difficult to do, and not just because these people are bad at their job. I think that is something really important. And also, like I said at the beginning, these revisions happen all the time, and they have happened for years. So the fact that you're stepping up at this time, in response to this specific issue, whereas like you have years and years prior to this to make something like
years and years of them doing a bad job, it would be the counter argument.
Yeah, because you could, in my opinion, it's like, could have made this decision 3 months ago, 4 months ago, if you were upset at the process by which it was done. And Trump has also offered no explanation as to the technicalities of why he's removing this person.
There's the obvious thing here, which is Trump has a storied history of firing people who don't do things the way he wants them, right? So like, come on, that's obviously what happened here. But there is this argument of like, why is it this inaccurate?
Yeah, I want to jump in. Okay, I can totally agree. I've talked about this well before Trump came into office, that the BLS has been consistently wrong and consistently revising down. I want to challenge one thing you said. You said that they often, it's very standard to revise later.
Yeah.
That's true. The BLS has been around for decades, right? But for the longest time, they had a pretty even amount of revising up and revising down. They might undershoot it, they might overshoot it. Recently, as in the past few years, it has been a consistent pattern of starting out too high and then later quietly revising down, which is a pattern that is
woke.
I don't know what it is, but they're clearly overstating the health of the economy. Now, I don't mean I don't think it's, I fully disagree with the thing that it's like political or planned or they're like sneakily changing the numbers. My understanding is that there's two parts to it. Number one, survey data has fallen off a cliff. People no longer respond to the surveys they use to help get an accurate data of the environment. So second thing, they've been job cut. They've been slowly but surely squeezing the number of people. So they have fewer people getting fewer accurate data from response surveys. That has made them less and less likely to be accurate. The second thing is they use this thing called the birth-death adjustment. So they'll get the survey data and they'll make this thing called the birth-death adjustment. It's not about births and deaths of humans. It's about births and deaths of companies. So basically they'll say like, oh, well, we know that there was a registration of 10,000 new companies. On average, a new company will hire 7 people. So we're going to say there was, 70,000 new jobs. That's the idea. The birth of a new company leads to this much average new jobs. Well, it turns out post, let's say COVID, but even before that, in the smartphone era, the birth of a new company is primarily a single person Uber driver, a OnlyFans creator. That is where the majority of new company registrations are. And so they're still adding 7 or 6 new jobs to the economy.
Okay, so I was going to ask, I understood this.
Yeah.
And isn't that why the overestimation is the consistent part? We're more likely to be overestimating because this is the gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they have not adjusted this obvious flaw in their data for now years. We just all know why Trump did this. He hasn't even hidden it at all. He just calls her woke news fake.
So blatant.
It's not like he's like, you know what? I think statistically there could be some updates to the model. He very clearly has. Actually, there's clips of it. Probably not gonna have it here. But in previous months, when the jobs numbers are good, he lauds it. He praises it.
Imagine we're in China like a year ago.
Yeah.
And we have a problem with rising youth unemployment. It's starting to skyrocket. There's a bunch of just young university grads who have nowhere to go. They have no jobs to get. This part of the economy and the job market is really struggling. And we keep publishing the increasing data from internally within the government, right? And that goes out to anybody in the world can look at that data and see the rising youth unemployment in China. And then the Chinese government decides we're not going to make that or publish that report anymore. And then I as a third party, Ray Wong, I come in and I report, it's like, well, they weren't that great at reporting the youth unemployment statistics all along. Like, it probably is good that they stopped making the report and they can revise it. It's like, maybe that's true. But the timing is crazy. You have chosen specifically to do it now when, even by your own standard, the problem has existed for a long time. So even if you were to take that argument.
100%. And I want to call it one specific thing because Trump has directly lied on something he keeps saying about this, which he said this very partisan hack right before the election was putting great jobs numbers out for Biden. And then right after the election, revised them down 800,000, the biggest revision ever. And he changed the month by one. And it's so annoying because they did do that major revision down before the election, 1 month before instead of 1 month after. And so it actually was really damaging to Biden. I remember it because I made a video about it at the time. It was like right before the election, they said, actually, there was way fewer jobs than thought. And it really hurt Biden. Listen, I do think they've been consistently wrong, and maybe you could change it, but it just, there's no doubt in anyone's mind. We're all like playing along like WWE or something. Yeah. Like, we know why he did this.
He's like Thanos with the reality stone. You know, he's like, they turned down the numbers.
All the Gen Z viewers perked up.
Yeah.
Wait,
you know, he's like, reality is whatever I want to make it. It's so cool. He just tweets. His Twitter is his reality stone. And he just does whatever he wants.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's fucking wild. But I want to show something. So slide 8 is the unemployment rate, which has now ticked up to a local high of 4.2%. However, if you hit the next slide, the orange line is the unemployment rate. It's actually relatively low. Like, look how, 4.1, 4.2 is in the long scheme of the past, couple decades. Now, one thing you'll notice on that orange line is that when the unemployment rate starts to tick up, it usually doesn't stop until you're in a recession. I want you to, you can see the examples in the past. So that would be 2001 over there, spikes in 2001, goes up in 2008, spikes in 2008, goes up in COVID, huge spike. So there's rarely a situation you can see on this entire graph where it goes up and then goes down. When it starts rising, that's called the Sahm rule. Basically says if over 3 months you're seeing rising unemployment, it's a good trigger of a recession. And again, Claudia Sahm has disputed it around this because this is post-COVID and things are weird. This white line is surveys of job goers on how hard it is for them to find and keep a job over the next 6 months. You'll notice for all of 30 years of history, this white line and this orange line have stayed pretty lockstep. Survey goers have been pretty good at saying when things are good or bad.
Based on the actual unemployment data.
Yes. There's a strong connection between what they're saying and what we're seeing on the actual data. Around COVID, around 2018, 2019 and beyond, there's been this massive divergence, this big gap. Again, this is the work of like Mike Green. I don't want to take credit for it, but the theory is that this gap is because of things like the gig economy, like Uber, like OnlyFans, like all this stuff that has made people no longer file for unemployment even when they've lost their job because it's not worth the hassle and they can get more money quicker by just plugging into the gig economy. But their jobs are so lost because this survey is about like real jobs. Based on this graph, if the orange line was tracking the white line like it had done historically, we would be closer to like a 6, 7, 8% unemployment. We would be much higher. And that is the economy that people are feeling, but that is not what the data is showing. Last thing I'll say. Again, I'm not a statistician. This is off of work of people smarter than me, but I've done my best to really understand it. This black line on this one, all this data comes from the few states where you're not allowed to drive Uber under 25. So it gives us a really rare insight into what happens when you get unemployed and you can't drive Uber. Like say you're 24-year-old, you get unemployed. So you'll notice previously the black line, this is people who can't drive Uber, 16 has always been under the orange line. Okay? It's always been less. Just now, it is higher. So people who are 16 to 24 in few states where this happens, they are having a worse unemployment rate than people who can drive Uber. This is like a weird statistical anomaly that is showing that like in the few areas we can see the difference, Uber is making a massive difference. People that can do it are not filing for unemployment. And so the data is being skewed. So I just want to bring this up just to show that I think a huge part of this is the gig economy. And I've surveyed my own viewers and many of them that are recently employed said it's such a massive hassle to go through all the paperwork to file for really meager unemployment benefits. And also you can't claim them while you're driving Uber. So you have to choose one or the other. Yeah. And it's much easier. All this to say that I think my theory is that the labor market already sounds bad. It is worse than that. It is worse than what we are getting at. But I think we're going to hear from actual people. Maybe you have like,
yeah.
Can you give us